Make It Right, the manufacturing podcast.
Manufacturing has always been pursuing higher production rates, increased productivity, more efficient use of materials, better product quality, improved safety, reduced factory lead times, not to mention shorter work weeks for labor, and better worker safety. Digitalization, or Industry 4.0, IiOT, smart factories, or whatever you choose to call it, is changing the manufacturing landscape, and it has been for a while. Sensors littered throughout factories collect and share data to monitor and enhance operations, and data collection can start as far back as the source of a product's raw materials. This mountain of data is going to have a huge impact on four primary areas: operational efficiency, predictive and preventative maintenance, supply chain management, and inventories and logistics. This week on the Make It Right podcast, we're looking at the digitalization of manufacturing. Kevin Snook and I are pleased to have Gary Mintchell as our guest. Gary does research, analysis, and writing about manufacturing. He's an independent blogger, and he's the host of Gary on Manufacturing, the podcast. So welcome to the show, Gary. Good to meet you.
Hi, good to meet you. Glad to be here.
We're really delighted to have you because I know that you get deep into manufacturing. And I think the first thing that I really want to get a sense from you about is, are most manufacturers moving forward with digitalization? And if they are, so it's a two-parter here, where do they actually start with that digitalization?
Uh, Actually, I think most people would like to get into it. The CEOs pick up magazines and they read and they say, oh, digitalization is good. Every survey I've seen so far of executive suite people, about 20-25% actually have active projects working on it, and about 60% wish they or know they should. And then there's always the few that say, what's a digit? But anyway, that's the way it always breaks down, and I expect to see more and more of this thing. Um, Time after time, and I just got through with attending a conference, virtually, of course, where a lot of practicing executives, managers, and engineers were speaking, and time after time, you get started about the same way if you're going to be successful. The C-suite, the CEO, and so on lets everybody know that they're behind a project, and then you put somebody in charge, and you have a cross-functional team. Uh, key is you put together a cross-functional team from operations and maintenance and engineering and information technology and whatever else to get it going. Define a business problem. Some people define engineering problems, and that's usually a mistake. Usually you're better off defining a business problem, and then you pick a pilot place, some plant within your empire or whatever, and pick a pilot place and do a pilot. And then the other key thing when you're doing all that, there's a lot of decisions to make up front. And the other one is to pick suppliers or products or solutions that scale. Because if you're in a if you're in a small to medium sized company, scaling is not quite as essential as if you're in a company with, say, 25 plants scattered around the globe, and scaling gets to be a problem. So think about all that. And it's a proven technology, or it's a proven process, if you will, that you pilot it, you tweak it, make it successful, roll it out, and then most of the companies working on this have been working on it for a while. They have the pilots done, and they're in the process of scaling. Those are the interesting people to talk to because there are challenges at every step of the road. So kind of a long answer to start with, but that's a broad thing. But and I think the other interesting thing about digitalization is when I actually worked before I became a writer, and back in the late 70s, I actually put in what was called back then an MRP system, which was essentially, today it would be called MES. And essentially that was digitizing various components of the bill of materials and inventories and so on. So most companies have some start on digitalization. They just probably don't realize it.
Okay. And for I think you said it was 25% are doing it, 60 are thinking about it, and then the rest don't have a clue. Of the 25% that are getting into it, are they seeing the return on that investment?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll just give you an unqualified yes. There are returns, and therefore they are proceeding with the rollout. And I think the stories go out, therefore the 60 or 65%, whatever, are saying, the board's going to be asking me for better returns. I better do something. So.
Right. Right. Okay. So let's discuss those four key areas that are this report that I read said are going to be the spots where there's going to be the biggest impact. Um, it's operational efficiency. What can you tell me about that? Where are the most impactful changes in that?
What look, to back up just a little bit, so we're going to
Sure.
start with data. So that's become my key thing, and as I look at all this and I talk to people on all sides of the thing, and so operational efficiency comes from, and you can go back a long way and thought about this, but it comes from compiling data and then having a way to, the most current databases and do an analysis and so on. And then I like to combine it with lean, and the people I'm most impressed with are combining the data with lean, which is sort of a non-automation process, but it sort of works with automation. And therefore, a step at a time, you just do it a step at a time, and I improve this machine or this process or whichever step it is that you're working on that you define the problem as. If you define your problem well and you take a step, so you're not going to improve an entire plant's efficiency overnight, but a step at a time you start showing results. And if you pick wisely, you will show a return that proves the process, and then you could take further steps.
Okay. So, Kevin, you've been through this process before with one of your companies. You go in and you start on a pilot project and you move them through. I mean, you must have questions here for Gary.
Yeah, of course. And I think the big one for me is where do you see the significant difference? We've been doing lean projects for a long time. People have been doing data analysis and Pareto charts and picking the 80-20 and all of those different things for a long time. Where do you see the significant benefit from moving from that, if you like, old style, write the numbers down, do the Excel chart, etc., to really digitalizing your factory?
Yeah, you really hit the problem, and I often tell the people who supply MES that their biggest competitor isn't another MES company; it's Microsoft Excel, but because everybody's still piling that in, and that gets us into, so there are so many terms, and Janet brought up some, and one's Internet of Things. So Internet of Things is a buzzword, and I hate marketing buzzwords, but this actually has some meat to it, because Internet of Things means there's a whole bunch of things out there, and hopefully they're digital or I can make them digital. And Internet means I connect them. Internet essentially means Internet Protocol, IP, and the stack, and without getting geeky. But so what it really means is I'm going to connect a whole bunch of things, and I'm going to bring them in, and then I'm going to be able to work with it. Previously, in Lean, a lot of times you spend an awful lot of time just trying to get data, figure out what's going on, Gemba and walking the floor and all that sort of thing. And getting data is more important. So the Internet of Things is really a key beginning component of turning things into digital. And that's kind of what you're saying. People confuse these. And Industry 4.0 is we could really get philosophical on that. And Internet of Things in the United States, we have an initiative called Smart Manufacturing. So there are just a ton of these words. But start with the Internet of Things and tie things together. A person I loved to interview before he retired was a vice president at the time with the Foxborough company. He used to tell me, Gary, just imagine what you could do in a process plant if you could just throw sensors out there and know so much more about what's going on out there. 20 years later, guess what? We're starting to get there.
So you see it as the difference to be able to pick up and in each different part of the equipment, be able to pick up data in real time and then do the analysis on it. Well, I think one of the challenges I always had when I go into a company as a consultant is they would have these monthly meetings, and at the monthly meeting they'd be trying to review the data and the things that have been happening over the past month, and people would be forgetting, what happened 3 weeks ago, and they'd be looking at a Pareto chart, say, does anybody know any more about what happened here? And everyone's like, oh, I don't know, maybe let me go take a look at the logbook and we'll see if we can figure it out, and we'll get back next month with the answer. Whereas you can't make good decisions in real time with that kind of information system. But when you've got real-time data, then not only is it collecting the information for you in real time, but it's also doing all the analytics on it at the same time, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. My early management training vice president I worked for in this manufacturing company called accounting. At the time, we didn't have so many departments, and he called accountants ancient historians. In other words, everything that they did in a report every month was worthless because it was ancient history, didn't help us today. And I've carried that thought with me for the last 40 some odd years. So yeah, you're exactly right. And one of the really cool things happening now, there are various kinds of manufacturing. There's discrete manufacturing where you see the pieces coming down a conveyor, and process manufacturing where things are in a pipe or something like that, or batch things. But it doesn't really matter. It's sort of how you organize. But let's just imagine that we could put people in the same room, whereas you used to wait for a report. You would get a report, and then you'd sit down. The monthly meeting was, I've been in those. They're fun. But anyway, so just imagine if you have in this same room with a bunch of screens, and all this digital information is coming in, and an engineering person is there, and they see a screen with engineering information. If you're in a process plant, they can see the status of loops and things that they do. The operator's trying to operate things, and then you also have a maintenance or reliability person, depending on how that department is organized. You'll have those. And if not in the same room, at least on call is somebody from information technology. And the operator sees something, say, hey, I've got a little bit of anomaly here on process X. And the engineer says, I see something. And the maintenance person looks up his log and says, oh yeah, we checked that like 3 weeks ago, and there wasn't anything then, but it's time for another check. And the cool thing about all that is the real-time information comes in, and they all trust it because it's all from the sensors and so on. And then they can talk immediately, and it's called a unified operations center in process plants, and it's becoming a thing. And it's more than just a dream of the suppliers now. It's actually in process. And there's a local refinery. I'm just drooling to get in and see their new, they probably won't let me in anymore, but anyway, just to see that unified operations center, because what a cool way to start managing an entire plant rather than a loop. So yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, get rid of the ancient history, and where IT comes in is you bring all this data in. Some of it goes to these screens. It's real time. Some of it goes into what's called an edge computer, which then sends batches up to the cloud, and then that can be analyzed for trends, and you can do your Pareto charts and SPC and all that kind of cool stuff. And analytics is so powerful these days that you can use that ancient history to look for trends, but you can operate the plant on real time. And that's data is just like the key thing. You're exactly right.
And what you can also do at that time is you can really put some metrics around each of those data, right? So where Janet was asking about return on investment, you can build the models into the system so that you're getting real-time return on investment information as well.
A really cool thing, I haven't seen a lot of this in actual production yet, if you will, but it's coming and it's available for certain kinds of manufacturing, is to give the operator. So in a process plant, the operator is a key person, sits there and tweaks the process to get it working right. Give them another metric on their screen that's dollars or pounds or euros or whatever, and therefore, okay, if I tweak this process, if I burn it a little hotter, I will be more efficient, I'll get more product out. But this little screen over here says, oh, but your input cost now is higher and you just cost profit. Oh, if I come back down, I can balance productivity and profitability and so on. That's just one instance of a way to use data to manage for business success as well as process success. And I think we'll see more of that come on as we progress down this Internet of Things, Industry 4.0 trail.
That sounds super powerful to me, right? To see the dollars for whatever like tweak you make instantly. It's like, oh, don't do that. Like turn that down a bit, right?
Yeah, Janet, on that one, as soon as you said that, Gary, it reminded me of my kids playing games on their computer. And their ability, first of all, they've got 2 or 3 screens going on, and then they've got all these little dials and things all over the place, and their ability to be able to scan the different screens, see how much life they've got left, see where they need to pick up the new ammo from, you know, they've got all of this stuff going on, and that is how they're making their decisions.
Mhm.
That's exactly what we're trying to bring to the manufacturing, right? We're kind of gamifying the manufacturing process.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I've watched my
Mhm.
grandkids, and they could switch screens so fast it blows my mind. Uh, and yeah, I'm early in the computer revolution. You know, I just had little Pong and stuff. But yeah, exactly. I had thought about the gamification aspect, but that's there's some truth to that. Yeah,
So
without
And I think it
devaluing
is.
what they're really doing. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly, it's that ability to evaluate in real time so quickly and then be able to make minor tweaks. And I think when you obviously you don't want to be playing with an ongoing manufacturing system, but the ability to be able to do a design of experiments and then see in real time how that's affecting the process and
Mhm.
how it's affecting, like you said, the dollars. I think that's incredibly powerful.
Oh, it is. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the problem is using the word game, and I can hear some, you know, C-level manager going, "You're playing games with my process plant." But I don't know if you've heard of Dick Morley. Dick Morley was one of the inventors of the programmable logic controller, and I got to spend time with him a long time ago, about 20 years ago, at a conference, and we were walking through one of those game companies. This was in Nashville at Opryland, and we're walking through this where there's like ski machines and all kinds of. And he said, "Look at those screens. That's the future of control." And so on, and so you bring this up 20 years later, and that's exactly right. You know, the game people and the way they can do their screens and visualizations and so on is will help us out tremendously in our tasks in manufacturing.
I wonder what the power of the younger brain, like Kevin, your kids and their age group, because like for me, if I saw all that data on a screen at one time, I'd be like, oh, what's happening here? Right. Whereas they've trained their brains to be able to absorb all that information constantly. So where do those young people take manufacturing in the future as we become more data driven, right? And they can make those quick decisions because they're trained to do that and they've been gamifying their life for the last, 20 years.
Well, I'll have a stab at that one. For me, you know, we're struggling to get enough smart young people into manufacturing because, frankly, manufacturing, the picture that's painted about it is it's not very sexy. You know, you're outside of the town. You don't have a Starbucks downstairs. It's just not an environment where a lot of young people are being attracted. But if we can figure out how to bring those elements together and show that there's a real level of skill and capability building and things that we require in manufacturing, then I think that's a completely different different sort of inroad to manufacturing for younger people. And I think this is where digitalization has an opportunity to be able to bring younger people in with younger mindset and a whole sort of new view of how we could do this. And that's part of what you're looking at, Gary, right?
Oh, exactly. So in manufacturing, change comes a little slowly, but we've known for some time that we've got to attract these younger people, but we have to do it, go with the changes so that they can have an impact. And so I visit, well, before COVID, I used to visit a lot of companies. And so you've got the supplier side and you've got what we call the end user side. But on the supplier side, more of those younger people are coming in with the urge to design things in this new way. And not only do we have buzzwords like human-centered design, but we have just the gamification or better screens or research that they'll do and programming in a different way. Let's use some modern programming tools, throw out C, use Python or whatever it might be. Or Node-RED or whatever is some cool stuff. Node-RED on a Raspberry Pi can do an awful lot of control, by the way. But and they know how to do that. And on the end user side, part of the problem was the pictures, the actual photos, the pictures that were portrayed for high school students of manufacturing. When I started out and I walked through an engine plant, it was greasy, dirty, and it was noisy, and the earplugs they gave you didn't help. And within the last few years, I did a tour into Europe, and my wife went along, and we visited an Audi plant in Hungary. And it was so amazing. It was an engine plant and an assembly plant, and it was so safe. You didn't even need to wear safety glasses, really. There was nothing flying around, and they were milling and machining engines, and you didn't know that. I mean, you could just talk, and everything was clean and all that. Things have changed a lot, and we need the new pictures to get out there to people. It's not your grandpa's plant anymore. So we're working on that. I just reviewed on my blog a book by an old friend by the name of Mike Nager, who he's in training now. That's his full-time job, training for control. And the whole point of the book was to entice people into manufacturing and point out all the impact you have on society by making stuff sustainably and profitably and so on. So there's work going on. We all need to do more.
Yeah.
I love that idea of calling it smart factories a lot more as well, because I think the whole idea around smart factories aligned with your smartphone and new technology. I think that's getting away from the idea of dirty gears and oil spilling all over the place, and those old style manufacturing techniques, although they still exist in some parts of the world and in some parts of the industry, so much of that has been replaced now by what we would call as really smart manufacturing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Ergonomics, just so many things that have helped a lot. So yeah, smart manufacturing is it's a good term. I like it as a descriptive term.
So pardon my ignorance, but when we say smart manufacturing, does that go through all of those 4 areas where they say that digitalization is going to have that big impact, like predictive and preventative maintenance and supply chain management? Is that everything? It's all in that smart package?
Yes.
Short answer. All right, good. No, that's good.
It kind of depends on it's actually kind of more of a geographic thing, I think, than it is. Industry 4.0 was Industrie 4.0 for the Germans because it came out of Germany.
Yeah.
And the rest of Europe used to call Internet of Things, similar thing. In the United States, we came up with this smart manufacturing thing. But yeah, it's a process of, by the way, digitizing. And then you digitalize things, meaning you have made my products digital. just throw away all these, throw out all these buzzwords, and we're in good shape.
Yeah, most people well, if they're like me, they're like, I don't know. There's so many buzzwords. What's happening here? So let's talk a little bit about the predictive and preventative maintenance, because Kevin, you work in this area. But as the speed of manufacturing increases and the cost of maintenance and unplanned downtime increases as well, um, does this approach to maintenance require a mindset shift for manufacturers? Because it's like, I mean, if we had that dollar sign on the screen for the operator and he's going, if I just crank it up, we're going to make this much more product and we're going to get this, but it's maintenance time. Do I stop the machines? Like, what's the mindset change that needs to happen here? Or is there one? Gary?
Yeah, you could say, I have availability and I have usage, and if I'm using it, it's not available, and if it's available, I'm not using it, and that's the maintenance and the operations side. It's a conundrum. Yeah, so one of the big decisions to make is when to take something out of process to do repairs or whatever, and what you're trying to avoid is the unplanned. Oh darn,
Yeah.
unit 4 just went down and now we can't make whatever it is we're making. So that's what you're trying to avoid. And quite frankly, so we go back to these business decisions, and we like to talk about, preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance and condition-based maintenance and reaction maintenance and all these different kind of things. And we've had that for years and years. And all the IT companies I've consulted with, when they start looking at manufacturing, they think, well, we do predictive analytics and other things. We could take it and do predictive maintenance. Well, they've been doing predictive maintenance. That's the point really is back to my unified operations thing, is a whole different mindset of the maintenance people go do their thing and they don't talk to anybody unless there's a problem and they get called and why didn't you do this? And now if we're all talking together from the same data coming in from the Internet of Things and all that stuff, the idea is to make better decisions more quickly and appropriately. And I think that's where we're going. That's why data is so important. And then that's why good general managers or plant managers have brought their teams together and stopped the bickering. I started out in operations and I went to engineering. And when I was in operations, we all yelled at the engineers for being stupid and they didn't understand anything. I went to engineering. I thought, well, gee, there's a bunch of nice guys here. We're all working. We're all just trying to do the same. Design a good product and whatever. And we still do that. We still have this bickering, IiOT and everything. So good management is starting to bring these teams together and say, hey, we got a common problem. The common problem is we need to make more money in this plant or they'll shut us down. So let's go for it. So that's my take on that whole predictive, preventive, condition-based, reliability-centered. All those things are real things, but the real point is, how do I get maintenance and operations and engineering all together so we can make the appropriate decision at the appropriate time?
I'm going to throw in another D word here, Janet, and that's democratization of data. And this is really about getting all the data in the hands of the right people to be able to make a decision together. And I think that term was sort of put into use by Peter Diamandis, who runs Singularity University. And that whole idea around when in the past, certain people had certain amount of information and they were considered to be the experts, and they were almost holding on to that. Now we've got so much information and so much ability to put it out to so many people. What's more important is how we do the analysis on that and get the data in the right format for people to be able to make easy and right decisions. And that's where I love this idea of democratizing the data, and exactly as Gary was saying, getting into the hands of groups of people who can then sit together and say, okay, now immediately, what are we going to do? And it brings up to me, it's a little bit like I'm in a Formula One, right? In America, it might be NASCAR or something. And you've got these cars going around a track And the key is the worst possible thing is to have that car fail at the far side of the track. Basically, your race is over. What you want to be doing is looking at what's happening with the car and all the systems on the car and everything you can pull in to say, okay, when's the perfect time to bring that car in, do a 4-minute pit stop, and then let a 4-second pit stop, and then let them get back out again. And that's really about having that team of people looking at the right data at the right time.
I'd like to move over to supply chain management so we can work our way through these different spots. But how is digitalization changing or going to change how supply chains are managed? Because there's going to be so much visibility down the supply chain. I'm really curious about how willing people are going to be to share some of their information. I mean, you guys are in this, you must see it. So, Gary.
Well, I don't think there's a willingness. I think people are going to be told they're going to be sharing. You know, kind of look at Apple and the things Apple's going through, and you know, we can look at it from like today's picture of COVID disrupting all the supply chains, and you need visibility, and then you bring in politics. Like every country wants, you know, their own thing, and yet the companies are trying. You know, no one country has everything, and so the companies are trying to figure it all out. And so that's part of the contract, I think, anymore, is we need to be connected. We've had a function called track and trace for a long time, and especially consumer packaged goods, food and beverage manufacturers had to do that to expedite recalls and so on. And we're just better with Internet of Things. We might as well throw that back in because it's a key thing that we could tie all this together and get true visibility all the way through. And it actually works for the supplier being able to look into the actual manufacturer, because they need to know sometimes when to ship. I come from Honda territory, and there's the assembly plant, and then there's a million warehouses around it from all the suppliers who are feeding just in time into the plant. And when you're operating that, you've got to have visibility. And now all the way to the customer. And if I can monitor the end customer, that feeds back into product development. And so I can make a better product to satisfy work. You know, it all ties together, and it's all based on this connectivity and Internet of Things and databases and visibility. So yeah, we're just going to see more and more of that as things get complex in the supply chains, and I've got to make decisions. It's a crazy world, but if I'm in that business, it's challenging. And challenge is good.
Yeah. Then I guess we probably learned from COVID, at least some other manufacturers have told me this, that, you know, they've realized that some of their suppliers couldn't supply them or are too far away. So now if you've got visibility into your supply chain, you probably have to have a couple of secondary suppliers for some of your stuff, just in case you can see that guy's not going to be able to deliver what I need. So I got to shift my observations over to this guy so he can get me what I need when I need it.
We can't build cars in the United States right now because we don't have chips, computer chips.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, that's a crucial area of management for a large company, for sure.
Yeah. Kevin, do you have any comments as far as the supply chain management? Do you see any issues through there?
Yeah, very much. And I love the idea of transparency. And I always think that the more transparency we have, the better decisions we can make as a group. But you have to be able to develop trust between the different groups. And this is always the issue. When you ever ask a business owner to share information, they're always worried about what you're going to do with that. And so what that really means is that there has to be that. Gary mentioned it before. You start with a pilot project. You show that there's a mutual benefit and a benefit, and the benefits are shared throughout the organization, throughout the links to the other suppliers and the customers. And then gradually you build that element of trust, showing that this is good business for everybody. And so, yeah, there's those two words there, transparency and trust. And you have to find the very, very sort of fine balance between the two.
I'm just keeping an eye on the time for you, Gary, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But let's go on to inventories and logistics. So, tell me about the role that digitalization is going to play here for inventories and logistics. What key challenges do you see?
Uh, Interestingly enough, I just interviewed a company. It's a startup company, and their particular take on software for manufacturing is not to trace assets, but to trace materials inventory, if you will, through the whole process for management to make better decisions and so on. And so we're getting into that. Inventory, of course, is a negative, not a positive in most cases.
Mhm.
So we're trying to manage that. I'm not a logistics expert, but there are interesting Internet of Things implications for logistics in the sense of tracing and keeping moment by moment real-time data on my trucks and ships and planes and whatever other carrier there might be, drones, I guess. Uh, that are getting products from here to there and from us to them and so on. And so it's just part of the whole transparent big process of collecting data and being able to handle all that, which makes the IT people more important in a way of being able to build databases and so on and get me information, not for the monthly meeting, but for the daily stand up. So, and we're moving that way. And it's a very optimistic to me, progress that we've made in making these things better so that better decisions are made and manufacturing is more of an essential part of an enterprise.
I think it's interesting. You had mentioned earlier that, you talked to some people in the past, like people 20 years ago who had this vision of where we were going, and we're finally just getting there. I mean, from your standpoint, Gary, when does it all finally come together and it's more than 25% of these people just getting started and doing pilot projects and moving through so that we're like those big auto manufacturers and things like that? How far out is it?
Oh, you're going to see a lot of momentum in the next 5 years.
Okay.
COVID has changed an awful lot of visions of management, remote work, and now we've got better connectivity. And because we've got that, we've got more security. We didn't even mention security.
Hmm.
That's a whole nother, two topics for you. But anyway, things are coming together, and it's very interesting to me to see from all the different angles things coming together. And as the pilot projects prove and the word gets through the industry, I think in 5 years you're going to see an awful lot of momentum, and that's globally. I'm not looking just at the U.S., but globally you're going to see a lot of that.
Okay. How about some key takeaways, Gary, for people that are looking at digitalization? I know you started off the top, say start with a pilot project, figure it out, and then move on to the next one. But some key takeaways for those manufacturers who are just thinking about dipping their toe in.
The key takeaway is first off, solve a business problem. I like to talk about solving big problems, but solve a business problem, uh, form cross-functional teams, start small, scale up, prove success, and get your people. There's a philosophy of build on little successes and build momentum, and that's where we're at. People are doing it, and more people need to do it.
Okay. And bringing in experts to help you with the things that you just simply don't know.
Oh yes, for sure, and you'll need a variety.
Hmm.
Nobody knows everything is the, kind of that part. So you could go out and hire a big firm or something, or you could find subject matter expertise in different areas. But yeah, yeah, that the way we are today, running lean operations with fewer people, you'll have to bring in outside people to help.
Okay. Gary, Kevin, do you have any final questions?
No final questions. Just I love this topic, and I love what you're working on, Gary. I think this whole idea around transparency, bringing in real-time data. I've always said that if you've got to make good decisions, you need good data. If you want to make fast decisions, you need real-time data. And that's exactly where you're working, and trying to make that more comfortable for manufacturers to get their foot in the door and get started. And I think the one thing I would say is, for the manufacturers, don't be afraid of this. There's going to be a lot of learning as you go through it, but there's a lot of people there to help as well.
Right. Gary, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Good luck with your blogging and your podcast, and I hope we'll chat with you in the near future.
Hope so. Thank you.
You're welcome. Gary Mintchell is the host of Gary on Manufacturing. He's also an independent blogger on the manufacturing sector. And Kevin Snook is a manufacturing leadership advisor and author of the best-selling book, Make It Right, 5 Steps to Align Your Manufacturing Business from the Front Line to the Bottom Line. Make It Right's on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can listen through iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. Gentlemen, thank you again. Have a great week. I'm Janet Eastman. Thanks for listening to the Make It Right podcast.